So in this last part, we're going to talk about something that if you're going into the health professions, you're going to see. Osmosis and subsequently dialysis. The membrane that surrounds living cells is called a semi-permeable membrane. All right, and so a semi-permeable membrane is selective. It lets certain things cross, but others cannot. And so in a semi-permeable membrane, water, small molecules can pass across the membrane, but ions and large molecules can't. And so that semi-permeable membrane only allows certain things to be recirculated back and forth in the cell. Osmosis is where the passage of the solvent, usually like water, across that semi-permeable membrane will pass from a low solute concentration to a high solute concentration. So in osmosis, basically, you have the membrane right here, all right, and say you have some particles, and they're too big, they can't pass through that membrane, all right? So you've got a lower concentration of those same molecules that can't pass through on the other side. So if they can't pass through that membrane, what's going to happen is the water is going to pass from this side. No, the water is going to pass from this side to this side, from the low concentration to the high concentration. And because what it's trying to do is it's trying to dilute it so that the concentrations will be equal. And so if it's less dilute on this side, the water will have to move to that side and make this have a bigger volume until both sides have the same concentration. And so this is a much prettier picture than what I just drew. But so what this does is it causes something called osmotic pressure. And osmotic pressure is the pressure that prevents the flow of this solvent into a solution on the other side. So the pressure of the osmosis, the osmotic pressure, is going to keep this from happening. So what's that mean in reality? Okay, you have two solutions and they have the same osmotic pressure, such as the solution that's surrounding this red blood cell and then the solution that's inside the red blood cell. Our body has about 0.92% weight volume of sodium chloride and about 5% weight volume of glucose in the body. And those are ISO. So if you're given, you may have seen this in an IV if you've been in medical, 5% glucose, or some people say 1%. It's actually 0.92% normal saline. Those are the same as what's in the body. So we call those isotonic because they have the same exact osmotic pressure or concentration of stuff as what's already in our body. And so in the case of a red blood cell, that's what's going to be found inside the red blood cell, and that's what's going to be found outside the red blood cell in normal conditions in the body. And so they're nice and isotonic. And notice our little red blood cell looks very happy sitting in that solution. Now a hypo means low or under. So hypotonic solution has a lower osmotic pressure than what you find in the body fluids. So the concentration outside the cell is lower than the concentration inside the cell. And if you have a low concentration outside, okay, and a higher inside, we said water is going to flow into, from low to high, to try to dilute that. Okay, so what's going to happen is water will flow and keep on flowing into that red blood cell until it's going to be equal concentration with the outside. So if you have a low concentration of salt or glucose outside the body, then inside the cell, then water will go in there and it will keep on going, and it can eventually cause this red blood cell to bust open, to burst. Okay, so that's if it's in a hypotonic solution where you got low concentrations outside. If it's a red blood cell and this happens, we call this hemolysis or hemolysis. If you have a hypertonic solution, that means you have a high concentration outside the cell and low concentration of sodium chloride or glucose inside the cell. Then water is going to go to the area of higher concentration. This is a really dangerous thing because this is a whole lot bigger amount of solution than what's inside this little red blood cell. And so it's going to keep on pumping its water out, and it's going to start to shrink, and this is called crenation. And if it shrinks enough, it sticks together and it no longer functions. And so it can no longer carry your oxygen and everything. So that's a hypertonic solution where you have a high concentration in the body fluids outside the cell and then inside the cell. And this works for other cells too, but it's really easy to see that change in shape with your red blood cells. So in the human body, blood is filtered, because remember it's a suspension, so I can filter it, through the kidneys, and in that process we call dialysis. And so in dialysis, water, small molecules, and ions pass through our semi-permeable membrane. Only the large biological molecules that are like your proteins and your starch molecules and lipids and things cannot pass through that semi-permeable membrane. So what this does is it allows the waste products, instead of going through your kidneys, all right, and being filtered and sent back to the body, it allows them to go out, okay, because it's going to reabsorb your ions and your small molecules and water and take that back to the body because that's useful. But those big molecules, it's going to allow those to go on out in your urine. So waste products like urea and other things are going to be eliminated from the body. And so that's how it keeps your blood clean and how it gets rid of toxins. And that's why so often you see impacts on your kidneys when things go wrong, because you're having to work overtime to try to get rid of waste, even like drugs and things like that are going to accumulate in your kidneys. So if your kidneys can't do that job and they become incapable of removing your waste products, then you have to do something called hemodialysis, and we just say dialysis for short in medicine. And basically you've got a machine doing what your kidneys can no longer do. And so you have an artery and a vein, and you're going to take blood from the artery. It's going to be pumped through this system. It's going to drain and remove the big things, and it's going to reabsorb the good stuff. Okay, it's going to reabsorb the water and the red blood cells and things like that. But the other things are going to be removed. And so if your kidneys can no longer do the job, you're going to have to go in and have the job done by a machine. And that's what we call sending somebody for dialysis.